Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Billiton, just a innocent fox VTuber, I suppose, if you want to just call it that. But either way, today I am here to react to this video called Arknights lore. So you want to visit Terra, All Nations Explained Tour Guide Edition. I was able to get permission to react to this video. Thank you, Plus. So let's enjoy it together. And I do want to be upfront. I started, I believe, chapter 7 or 8. I think it was 7. But I haven't finished it yet. I am planning on watching the season 3 anime before just reading the story and then getting through the stages after that. But I am focused on Limbus Company at the moment, so it'll take some time. So in the meantime, I do want to get more familiarized with the lore by watching some video essays and reacting to some more trailers and songs and things like that, which you will see in the coming months. So let's enjoy it together.
Hey fellow netizens, Plus here. So, you want to visit Terra, a world we have only experienced at the tip of our finger, a world where a kingdom of chivalry and knighthood could turn into a corporate dystopian, where god-conquering China and the demon power-wielding Soviet Union don't quite get along, a world where angelic people were liberated through sweets and guns, where their ancient brethren are the most discriminated against amongst all races. Terra is probably one of the most complex and realistic fictional worlds I've ever consumed. And I choose the word consume not because I like it, it is because Arknights is not just a game, it is a glorified visual novel with absurdly high production costs, along with a ton of adjacent media to enrich its own characters and world building. Such as the character theme, songs that only exist outside of the game, official posts. Some are more cryptic than others, but all of them share the same trait, that is, the exploration of the world of Terra from a unique angle or different timeline. ARG,
I did not realize they put so much lore in the posts.
Is also an adjacent element that exists in Arknights media, which has hidden pieces of lore. Even web event and manga that cover small but important details can solidify the
manga.
The world of Arknights has been evolving ever since the game was released back in 2019. Countless main and side stories have been added throughout the years. More than 1.6 million words make up the total of the readable media in Arknights.
1.6?
It would take an average person over 90 hours to read through all of it. You can also view the entire lore of Arknights as 4 times the entirety of the Lord of the Rings. But what actually
4 times?
World building? What actually makes us want to visit Terra, despite the fact that all of us know how hazardous, apocalyptic and dystopian Terra really is? Are we at zero sanity? A world doesn't just pop up out of nowhere with all of its different nations. People don't just magically have specific traits for no particular reason. A nation doesn't wage war against one another just for the thrill of it. Otherwise,
I think this is one of the things I appreciate the most about Arknights. While I do play the game mostly for its skin, mostly because I don't really have time to actually read through the story in the game, which is why I'm planning to watch the anime and then reading the story online instead, rather than actually playing through the game stages. I will be playing through them, but mostly just skipping so I can get through the stages and then reach the current point that people are at. But it makes me realize that the world, in some ways, for those who do watch anime and have watched One Piece, it's kind of like One Piece with the way that they handle the world building. And what I mean by this is that in most series, usually whatever happens centers around the main character or the main character group. But in games like Arknights or series like One Piece, that's not really the case. You always have characters that are doing things behind the scenes for a reason. And just because a specific tribe or race does something, it's for a particular reason. They're not just doing it just because, which I feel like a lot of series fall into that, not because it's a bad story, it's mostly because it's just not their writing style. It's just the way that they're not used to writing. And I think a lot of writers tend to fall into the pit hole of focusing so much on the characters that the world building aspect is not really thought about to a very good degree. Or it is thought out well, but it's not presented in the story for the readers to understand and make their own opinions. The characters are the ones influencing the reader or viewer to form that opinion. But in games like Arknights or in series like One Piece, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, for One Piece, you do kind of get influenced on your thoughts on what is good and what isn't, but at the same time, you're not. Some people will be more on the side of the enemies, and some are actually on the side of the good people. But nothing is ever straight up black and white. It's very much gray in that case. Like, you can understand why they're acting the way they are. And because of that, it's really hard to like completely hate every single character. But at the same time, you know, there are like a few that fall into the pit hole of being actually bad, but not having like a true compelling background. If you watch One Piece, you might know what I mean. But Arknights is the same too. Like, we have this world called Terra, and all the nations have such rich history that we experience through the side stories, through the events, and even partially through the main story, at least based on what I've seen so far. And considering the fact that many people have said that that's also the case for the rest that I haven't read, it shows how much you can't really like forget about the world of Terra because it feels so real. And I think the only other series I can think of that's quite similar in that aspect, where they put a lot of care and detail into the world building, is the Lord of Mysteries, or Lord of the Mysteries. If you have ever checked out that series, it actually became anime recently. So although they went through it pretty fast, considering that a lot of the first volume of the novel was very much focused on world building, I actually feel like it's very similar to Arknights in that sense. So to many people who don't really care for, you know, world building, it can feel extremely slow. But once you consume that world building aspect and then move to a very major plot point, it all starts to make sense and everything gets connected together. And it's not just there just to build the world, it's actually there to truly make all the scenes in the future more vivid, more compelling, more, I guess it's stronger in your head on what you want to show to the viewers or to the readers or players, game players. And I think that's definitely something I really appreciate about Arknights, because there's not a lot of games or stories in general where you just can experience the whole aspect and it feels so rich, so gray, but then so distinct that you can't help but feel like you're in the world itself. And that's something I really like about this game.
Yes, it would feel very unnatural. What makes the world building of Arknights so fascinating is how they have both otherworldly fantasy elements and realistic conflicts between people and nations at the same time.
That's true, it's very balanced.
Stripped out one of the cruelest sections from our history books and put it into a fantasy world. It is probably the closest of world building to the likes of Game of Thrones, with all the different nations and their conflicts, how the history of some nations still haunts them in the present day, how some past events are connected with present international affairs, how certain nations used to be superpower but fell into obscurity, how there are world-ending threats but nobody gives a fuck about because everyone is busy dealing with their own shit.
That's true. To them, it's the norm.
The building of Arknights is quite complicated, and one can easily lose themselves in this giant labyrinth, which is why, to make the visit to this god-forsaken world more attractive, I've made this guide video to travel through every nation, to take a deep dive into each nation's unique history while admiring their sightseeing. Why? Because you clicked on this video, because you are curious.
Yes, I am.
You want to visit Terra.
I do. Oh, not really, actually.
Very important things that you need to hear. The world of Arknights has a lot of similarities with our world. However, there are a few things which make Terra a lot more different, despite its similarities in culture and nations. The main energy source for almost every nation is a dark crystalline substance called originium. Originium
Yes.
is often found in nature, in the aftermath of big catastrophes, or grows on living beings. There are three places on
painful.
Terra where the density of originium is extremely high. These spots are called prime veins, and only a few nations can claim to be truly profiting from those. Why that is because originium is often found in a very active state. It is flammable, explosive, and can even grow over time, if not contained correctly. This leads us to the second big factor on Terra, catastrophes. Just like in our world, catastrophe is nature's wrath in its purest form. Earthquakes, sandstorms, floods, blizzard, and meteor showers, to just name a few. In the world of Arknights, the word catastrophe is branded with a different kind of fear. These are oftentimes way bigger and more destructive than the catastrophes in our world. Catastrophes on Terra can easily wipe out an entire city within a day, and even if you somehow survive it, you are likely not going to survive the aftermath of it. As I mentioned earlier, active originium can be found right after a big catastrophe. Why is active originium bad? This leads us to the third point, getting infected. An incurable disease known as oropathy. If you get in contact with active originium, you are likely to get infected. Originium density will slowly become denser in your blood circulation. After a long time, solid crystals would grow inside your body and eventually even on your skin, causing great pain to the point of the inability to move or breathe. Aside from all these negative traits, infected people don't need to use a magic medium to cast art. Oh right, arts is the magic system on Terra, also known as originium arts. In some nations it is akin to magic, while in others it is viewed as a scientific field. But on the grimmer side, infected people experience great prejudice. Some nations mistreat them worse than others. There are places where they send them to forced labor camps, while other states prohibit them from practicing specific work or entering certain areas. The crystal on the host's body grows even after death. I wonder what we can do with those crystals. It sure would be a waste to throw them away. Anyway, you are definitely wondering how
I can't believe you said that.
survive in such a harsh environment, a world filled with never-ending
But I'm not surprised.
incurable diseases, and dangerous but profitable resources. How do nations manage to survive, let alone prosper in this world, to the point to even have golden ages or become world-dominating superstate? Well, in the world of Arknights, it is a common practice to build cities on gigantic moving platforms. These are being dubbed nomadic cities. These nomadic cities can avoid being in the center of an approaching catastrophe by relocating itself in time. This is only possible on Terra because of the tremendous amount of energy originium can provide. Now that I have told you the basics of this world, we will be heading right into it.
Cool, let's enjoy it.
Aka Ursus. Actually it means bear, since the majority of its population are Ursine. In the ancient times, the nation was known as the Empire of Hippogriff, but the Hippogriff was overthrown due to the elites' racist behaviors towards the lower class, which were primarily the Ursine people. After the coup, the nation was filled with pride and nationalism, which was the perfect combination for world domination.
World domination?
The proclaimed Ursus Empire started to expand westwards to gain more land and resources to fuel their continued expansionism, and while they were at it, they also oppressed small tribes and nations along the way. There was nothing the Ursus Empire hadn't fought against throughout their history of conquest: mythical godlike beings, demons from the north, and knights with guns. The only nation that proved to be a real obstacle was Kazimierz, the land of the knights. Nonetheless, the Ursus Empire proved themselves to have the strongest military amongst all nations, by expanding so much that it has become the biggest nation on Terra, even to this day. They throw spears at their enemies, having the tankiest defenders to stop anyone from making a dent into their positioning, while mortars can attack from afar.
I'm getting PTSD from that.
Sure, the artillery hit every single one of their targets until they died, a very miserable death. The army of Ursus spread fear all across Terra quite equally, by not only killing foes, but also their own civilians.
What's wrong with them?
Of Terra during Ursus' strength heyday goes like this. 5 groups of shieldmen can slaughter a squad of knights, 4 riot guards can wipe a settlement off the map, 3 Wendigos can conquer a small town, 2 army groups can decimate a duchy, 1 sovereign can throw the world into chaos. And this is excluding their most feared soldiers, the Emperor's Blade. They are literally
Wonderful.
the Tsar and would execute His Majesty's will at any given time. These fellows covered in mask use a demon power in combination with their near inhuman capabilities in combat and are mostly feared for their dark farts. If you see one, you might start a
wait, what? Let me see this.
near inhuman capabilities in combat and are mostly feared for their dark farts.
Dark farts. I mean, yeah, I guess that's right. It does look like, yeah, let's just go with dark farts.
If you see one, they might start a conversation like this. Take my advice, kill yourself. But with great power comes great responsibility, and that wasn't Ursus' strength. They usually put the people from newly conquered nations into their gulags. Their own citizens aren't treated any better because most of their resources go into its military effort. The Ursus population lived in a poor condition, and just like in the old days, the Ursus revolted again, this time putting an end to the brutal
as expected
regime. All of this happened because none of the elites really learned anything from history.
Clearly.
I mean, why learn from history when you can just repeat it?
I feel like this is very applicable to our life too. Why learn from history when you can just repeat it, right? But we should be learning from history. And even in games, they don't.
Anyway, the new rebellion brought big changes. Now all Ursine are equal, but some Ursine are more equal than others. Ursus has turned from an expansionist nation into a more open and conservative one. Its new ruling class are a new generation of intellectuals and royalties who seek to modernize the nation. This does sound pretty good, right? So what do you think the Ursus of today would look like? Well, it still inherits a strong nationalism, and the discrimination against the infected has gotten even worse ever since the incident in Chernobyl. Basically, an infected group called Reunion rallied together to riot, took over the entire nomadic city of Chernobyl and drove towards Lungmen. When I heard the news, this was my honest nuclear reaction. Oddly enough, even after the city was lost, it was still sending out a strong signal that it belonged to the Ursus Empire. Sounds like a skill issue to me. I thought it was simply a malfunction when Reunion took it over. Let's move on to our next
Are
step,
you sure
the
about
Great
that? Ah, so beautiful.
What's up, Beijing? Welcome to the Great Yan, one of the oldest nations in Terra. It is an imperial monarchy ruled by an emperor, and there are 6 ministries. As one of the oldest nations, Yan has preserved all of its traditional culture from its prehistoric dynasties and is now on their way to fully embrace modernization.
I do have to say, I appreciate how Plus, I don't know, I'm pretty sure Plus is the one video editing, but I really like how it makes the sprites move as if they're walking. It brings a lot of vibrancy and sets the tone really well when he's introducing each nation.
Their gigantic agricultural nomadic city, Dahon, which is able to feed almost the entire population of Yen on its back, and their international financial powerhouse Lungmen are just a few shining examples of Yen's way to progress and prosper. In fact, Yen has been known as one of the most stable nations on Terra, since it never really got involved in any warfare with other nations throughout its entire history. Yen
well, everyone should be moving there now.
To settle war-related matters, of course with the attempt to achieve its own political agenda. Aside from the stable and peaceful land, Yen is also known for its unwavering economic monopoly in the world of Terra. The Lungmen dollar, a currency that is very widely accepted amongst all
I need to farm
Terra,
that more.
simply because of its stability. It is so widely used that it is being viewed as Terra's main currency. But Yen wasn't always like this. Before the dawn of the Common Era, Yen was ruled by merciless gods, also known as Pharaoh-moods. Always in awe and terror, these Pharaoh-moods reigned over the people of Yen with their miracle-creating powers that just bent over the laws of nature effortlessly. But the emperor had a dream. He wanted the humans to govern for themselves. One day, Yenese scholars found bones of ancient Pharaoh-mood corpses. Were these dead Pharaoh-moods similar to their rulers? Did they had any connections with them? Nonetheless, one thing was clear to the current emperor: their masters were not so immortal after all. So he decided
that
to plot
makes sense. Oh
assassination
boy.
against his own deity. This act was then dubbed as the Great Hunt by
Clearly a
historians
great
of the
hunt.
modern era. They used ancient rituals as an excuse to gather all the heavenly beings to one spot, to kill them all at once. To do so, the emperor secretly gathered the biggest army around the deities, and they started the slaughter by killing the weakest first. The slaughter turned into a full-scale war between man and god, and it looked really bad for Yen. But in the midst of it all, one of the Pharaoh-moods, Sui, the one closest to humans, decided to fight against his brethren. This was the turning point of the war, but in actuality, Sui's true intentions was very selfish. He wanted to rule over Yen alone by helping the emperor to slay every single one of his brethren.
Wow, of course.
And while the Yenese army was exhausted from all the fighting, he would take the chance and strike when they were at their weakest. However, the emperor was aware of the plan and prepared countermeasures beforehand. Basically, the Great Hunt was a backstabbing contest to see who can backstab the most. I bet even Sui forgot on whose side he was fighting anymore, and ever since that day, Yen was known as the nation that slayed gods. Sui
That's
was not
kind of funny, honestly.
He was split into 12 fragments, 12 weaker Pharaoh-moods, so to say. Each of them have their own ideals, their own personality, and their own unique autism. Nien, a spice-loving extrovert who can create anything from weapons to entire nomadic cities out of thin air. She also makes shitty movies and likes to be around places where big things happen. Dusk, probably the best shot in waifu you can wish for, because she is so socially awkward that she only interacts with her painting, quite literally. She has made a world through her painting. Once you enter this world, it really makes you wonder who is real. There are only two kinds of introvert, the oh no people guy and the ill people guy.
There's a difference.
Later specimen. In Twilight's Embrace, Ling takes her place. She is the most mature one compared to the other two sisters, a strategist with wisdom and grace. With pen in hand, she crafts her rhyme. A poet
so pretty.
who bends both space and time. Her goblet filled, she drinks with ease, yet her mind remains sharp, like a breeze. Drunk or sober, none can tell, for in her dreams she casts a spell. Reality raps at her command, in a world where dragons stand. Enemies falter, lost in her sway, as Ling leads the drunk dance, night and day, forever poised, forever keen. She's always being chilling. Chongyue, he is the world's...
Let's just appreciate that entire rhyme. That was amazing. I can only hear it in awe.
strongest kung fu fighter. Through his immortal life, he has mastered all the fighting styles.
So that's who he is. I was wondering what the siblings were, but this makes so much more sense.
Artisan to its fullest. He have turned all of his techniques into consumable copy pasta. Shu, welcome to the rice field, motherfucker.
I love Shu.
For we will be harvesting these crops. Here is where we people sow. She is the flattest mother figure, but definitely not the least fertile. She is the sole reason why Yen is able to feed its growing population. Let's finally take a look at Yen in our current day and age. Thanks to Yen's geographical location, it is far away from the Terran heartland, which means it never gets involved in any bloody conflict between the many nations there. Throughout the centuries, it had its consistent population growth and resources to prosper, which is why it has become a laid-back superpower on Terra by
Yeah, I don't want to live there
its own
instead.
business. In addition, some of the 12 fragments of Sui are helping the Yen Empire to prosper. Nien can build the empire whatever they need, whether it is new nomadic cities for the growing population or walls ranging through an entire nation border to defend threats from the north. To Nien it is all a very trivial task. Shu, on the other hand, is the one making sure that the agriculture flourishes every year so that the growing population is getting fed. Chongyue has been training the Yenni soldiers for as long as he has gained consciousness and defended threats from the north. What that threat exactly is will be covered in part 2.
Oh, part 2? Okay.
What did she actually contribute to Yen? She was a great strategist who also defended Yen from northern threats, that's for sure. But she mostly did philosophical thinking and sophisticated drinking. After all, philosophy
course.
is best viewed through a lens made from the bottom of an empty bottle. And Dusk is a competitive hikikomori, nothing more, nothing less.
That makes sense.
All in all, Yin has managed to turn a few of the 12 fragments on their side, and is using them as multiple cheat codes in their Civilization 6 session. But not every fragment is working so obediently under the Yen government. There are a few other fragments lurking in the shadows, working against the current regime.
I mean, that would make
come
sense.
out and play a game of Wei Qi against the Emperor, and if he wins, he gets to go out into the land and spread chaos. Honestly, if it were by me, I'd just have flipped the table. Their endgame is to bring all 12 fragments together so they can revive the Sui once more. This is extremely concerning, because if Sui gets revived, it is likely going to turn Yen upside down and might even become a world-ending threat. It is what I'm worried about. It's definitely not because we would lose all 12 waifus and husbandos if Sui is completed. Why would I even think that?
Yeah,
Anyway, if
that's
we are
very
looking for
important.
the great Yen, then there's one place we simply cannot miss out on, and that is
Lungmen.
the economic
Yay!
power of Yen. It is a gigantic nomadic city that has special financial perks which benefits Yen's total economical growth. Its modernized super metropolis is anything but traditional. You can find the most hip clothing brands from all across Terra, from giant districts of world-renowned companies such as Raytheon, Rhinelab, and Mama John's, to
Mama
a
John's.
detective agency. There's anything in this restless city.
Oh.
A city where you can witness.
I actually did finish watching that.
A rat and a penguin. A place where you can have a date with your rat girlfriend in a Yenni's restaurant, enjoying a hot xiaolongbao. Lungmen is
I wanna
one
eat
of
that.
the places where diversity flourishes. Oh, and when we are talking about diversity, they are just not so keen with the infected. But hey, I mean, they would simply ruin the business and prestigious image of the
Aw.
city. So it is totally understandable. If you wonder where all the infected went, well, honestly, you are asking the wrong person. But if I take a guess, they are probably living somewhere at the outskirts of the city, places where people wouldn't see them. Conveniently, nobody would notice a thing if they die by the hundreds. Anyway,
Yes, I
enough with
suppose
the
that's right.
inconveniences of using Originium. Let's look at the
Considering
bright
what
side.
happened.
And with that, I mean, let's look at a different nation handling it. If it appears like a company, acts like a company, and smells like a company, then
Smells
it's
like a company.
Billiton is a corporatocracy primarily known for its booming originium mining industry. Its nature mostly consists of outbacks and deserts with its primary population of cultists. The birth of Billiton was thanks to the age of colonization. Back in the day, the area was discovered to be close to one of the 3 prime vein, which consists
so it's right
of
there.
originium sources. Every powerful nation sends their best expedition teams and mining companies in an attempt to claim the land for themselves. In the midst of the originium rush, the political situation
The Originium Rush kind of reminds me of the whole gold rush idea, or at least that movement.
between the superpowers in the Terran heartland began to brickle, which made them shift their focus back on their homeland. The expeditioners and companies were all left to govern for themselves. What looked like a grim reality was actually a blessing in disguise, because at that time they bonded together, formed a nation by declaring their sovereignty to all other countries. Of course, none of the superpowers in the Terran heartland would accept that, without attempting to overthrow the Billitonian government for a takeover. But because they were too busy with their own war games at that time, they could only send small forces to harass Billitonians. The superpowers met aggressive reactions and were repelled time and time again, until they finally learned their lesson and backed away. Well, except for Victoria.
Victoria, why?
Control over the mining industry of Billiton and insert their sovereignty, and Billitonians were like, nice opinion, one small issue, I am Bunny. British felines, they are too full of themselves, even now. don't worry, we will get into that too. Billiton is still a self-governing corporatocracy, just less racist and more corporate. It has quadrupled its mining operations, however, with more originium mining comes more originium risks. A large portion of Billiton's population are in fact infected. But worry not, because Billiton doesn't treat the infected as bad as Ursus, since they are aware that working in originium mines would easily result in getting uropathy, so they
at least they're aware of it.
the infected. Not from an ethical perspective at least, but from a corporate perspective. They are discarded if they can no longer provide value to the companies. Usually the infected would still get a big paycheck that can last them for a few months. Good luck finding a new job as an infected, I would say.
That's true.
Next,
Thought they would treat them a little better, but I guess not.
Is known for its sportsmanship, home to chivalry and entertainment, a place that is near light. Welcome to Kazimierz.
Near light.
We talked about Kazimierz before. They were one of the only obstacles for Ursus' conquest. So, let's get to know the real deal. Kazimierz is basically Poland, if being a horse knight wielding arts makes you OP. A nation inhabited mostly by horse people, aka Kurantas. They occupied the vast
I'm just kidding.
heartland and is governed by a confederation of knight groups. The classical way to distribute
that's
power
cursed.
amongst the governing organs of a nation, you could say it is a bit closer to democracy. Other nations
democracy.
like to refer to Kazimierz as the land of the knights and just. Ever since the beginning of Kazimierz history, it has been a place where the strong protected the weak.
But do they actually protect the weak, as in like the infected?
But this nation did come with its own challenges. In its whole history, Kazimierz has faced countless brutal invasions from foreign powers, and questioned their ideology. Centuries ago, it was the Hippogriff Empire that never ended their harassment. These were actually quite easily repelled, and they eventually stopped trying to harass at Kazimierzian borders.
Thank goodness.
The Naimaran Khaganate, aka
Genghis Khan.
They beat the Hippogriff Empire to submission first, and were after Kazimierz as a side dish. Hence, while the Hippogriff Empire stopped the harassment, it wasn't because they didn't want to. It was because the great Khagan annihilated them. Khagan
Oh
had a vision.
boy.
He wanted to conquer the world. Now, how do I...
You know, they always say that they want to conquer the world and all that, and then they end up losing anyway, so why do they have to be so violent?
explain this so that modern people like you would get it? It was a coming of age tradition for all
Coming of age! Oh my gosh.
and bring back extraordinary tales to tell for their tribesmen. The great Khagan simply took it to an extreme level. He wanted to conquer everything. So, the great Khagan and his Nightmoran horde effortlessly beat the Kazimierzian knight army into submission.
No!
The governing knight group, the Pegasus, kneeled before the great Khan and arranged a peace negotiation. This was one of the most humiliating chapters in Kazimier's history.
I can see why if they're the land of the knights.
Grew extremely dissatisfied with the ruling Pegasus and eventually united under the goal to remove them from their position of influence. The revolt started when the Nightmoran campaign came to an abrupt end, with the sudden death of the Khagan in the far south. All went successful, and the new political system demanded the Knight to split their power and influence in a different way. They kept their political power, but had to turn a large portion of their wealth over to retinues. These people are referred to as merchants. They were given the task to manage the wealth.
That's good, or maybe not.
So many ways. The nation lived
Corruption.
through a peaceful era in which the merchants grew more influential
Oh.
every year. And by the time the nation formed a democratic system, the merchants had become such a powerful entity that they were able to control the economy of the nation. Merchants were always seen as lower class citizens in the eyes of the knights, but now that the merchants have banded together to become one powerful and wealthy entity, they can no longer be ignored by the governing knight groups.
So they got revenge.
Faction and the governing knights was very polarized. The knights were in full control of the military, while the merchants had control over the economy.
That does not sound good though.
But one small factor broke the status quo. It was a calm Saturday afternoon. A hairless knight noble was holding an auction in hopes to sell his castle on a nomadic platform to the highest bidder. he invited his other noble friends. One after another, everyone placed their bet. But to everyone's surprise, it was not a nobleman that would offer the highest bid. It was his own retinue. This was very inspiring to the merchants. Why don't we just buy off the knights' land and military? They can't outbid us all. The knights had to renegotiate with the now powerful merchants and formed a new governing entity, the
That's
Kazimierz
very
General
smart.
Chamber of Commerce.
Of them, I mean the merchants.
KGCC. This was a sad day for the knights, but a good day for the merchants, and a good day for people like us, who love to spend money and consume. Everything has to be centered around making money. The first nation that is taking capitalism as their motto was born.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
The knights only had one option: become a gear of the gigantic corporate machine. With this big change came the biggest shift in culture of Kazimierz. The nation has slowly but gradually abandoned their tradition. It is all about stonks and profit. War with a neighboring nation can solidify its own economic growth if it means sacrificing a large portion of its own knights.
Wow.
No more knights on the street, only dubsteps, Kazimierian dubstep. The sound of capitalism and soulless consumerism is what makes up the Kazimierz of today.
That sounds amazing.
As well as those who require it to survive.
Being sarcastic
the last
here.
knight left in this country has abandoned the nation in an attempt to slay the ocean. I think he went crazy after all that happened. But what about the good old tradition?
Oh my gosh, he actually did?
A noble knight and fighting for justice. Would the good people of Kazimierz really forget about all the heroism and chivalry? Would they forget about all the sacrifices the knights have committed to protect this land? Of course not, because knight sport is the best way to show the world that Kazimierz is indeed still the nation of knights.
That's good.
The Major. It is the biggest sport event on Terra, held every
Isn't that like
3 years in
the same as like
capital of
baseball?
Kazimierz. See it as a
Whatever it was
tournament
called
where
for that one.
participants are organized into teams referred to as
Wow, it looks
knight
exactly
clubs.
like it with the whole
Successful
red,
clubs
blue,
can
and
be
white.
promoted to knight orders, but must maintain their performance to avoid demotion. It is simple, just keep on winning and you will never be forgotten. Independent knights can also compete, but are generally at a disadvantage compared to knights from well-funded clubs. High-performing knights in the Major may earn titles and get sponsorships from all sorts of established brands and prestigious titles, such as the Blood Knight, the Black Knight, or the Radiant Knight.
Hey,
Like
we
I
have
said
the
before, this
last two. I don't know
tournament
if the
is
first one's
personification of
available.
knighthood, the peak of Kazimierz. It is the best thing they can offer. Every time a major event is held, the capital would dock with 3 other nomadic cities nearby to get more visitors and to make the major event even more unforgettable. Because
Clearly.
in recent decades, the Major has become one of the most anticipated sports events for people from all across Terra. It simply cannot be ruined by infected people on the streets, which is why they are forced to be relocated into dark city
Aww.
alleys, where foreign visitors wouldn't spot them, where the infected would be set out into harsh environment and starve. They would get so hungry, they'd eat a...
What would they eat?
The Major is the flagship.
Okay,
of
I guess we'll
Kazimierz
never know.
economy. They
But I assume it's
bring
something bad.
investment, huge profit from merchandise, cosplay costumes.
What, would they eat a
and
child or
ton of
something?
revenue from advertisements. Knights are celebrated like superstars. They obtain more money and fame than any knights from the previous era, and that is what
Wow.
Kazimierz is all about. Congratulations, Kazimierz! You went from chivalry to capitalism. Instead of raising the sword as a shield, they raised the sword for entertainment and profit. Maybe justice never existed in the first place. Well, that's enough for the nation of knights and capitalism. Let's take a visit to a nation that is still deep rooted
Ooh.
with classical culture and studies into its own past. Welcome to Leithanien, the land of
This
arts
place
and
is so
music.
beautiful.
Leithanien is a superpower in the Terran heartland. Most of its inhabitants are classical music-loving Capricorns. The nation is ruled by a rigid governing system of different Kreise with 2 empresses.
I really
as
like the
their
aesthetics
acting
for this
leaders.
nation.
This is the nation with an aggressive-sounding tongue and the longest swear word on Terra.
Donaulandschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitänswitwenversorgungskassen Mitarbeiter.
However,
So
they aren't
long.
by any means aggressive. They have the finest music concerts and historically longest study into the field of arts. In fact, their past ruler was once titled the most talented arts user on Terra. But please refrain from spelling his name or title. Don't ever do that, it brings bad luck.
No, don't worry, I
Leithanien
need
is
all the
also
luck
known for
I can
preserving
have.
and innovating classical music. And by innovating, I'm not talking about new orchestra pieces to enjoy. Well, they do that too, but I think you will understand it once I show it to you. This is how a battle with Ursus army looks like. This is how a battle with Kazimierz knights looks
Yeah,
like.
that looks normal.
And this is how a battle with Leithanien army looks like. Careful of music on the battlefield, especially when you face a Leithanien. Do you hear what I'm talking about? While other nations turn the battlefield into a bloodbath, Leithanien turns the battlefield into an orchestra.
And then you die
Leithanien art
anyways.
is unique because centuries ago they combined sound with art, and today they have mastered it, turning music into weapons. And you know what the best thing is? They are one of the few nations that don't discriminate against the infected, allegedly. They treat them like brothers and sisters. They
Oh,
only
that's
discriminate
sweet.
against those who can't use arts.
Oh,
Infected
okay.
people are sent into
Never
special
mind.
facilities for oropathy treatment. Well, the only drawback is that we don't get to see their infected family members once they are sent there. But knowing that they are being treated is good enough, right? Don't
No, they're
ask
probably
where
being
the
experimented
infected are.
on.
I'm sure they are all living peacefully in their facilities and getting treated. I mean, what would a nation with the
No,
highest
they
knowledge
probably
about arts do
experimented.
to those poor infected anyway?
For the arts.
Them, using them
Yeah,
as
clearly.
arts amplifier?
Probably.
Come on, we are not talking about Colombia. Anyhow, as one of the culturally richest nations
sure.
in the barren heartland comes with some unique attractions that we simply cannot miss out on. Zwillingstürme, the capital of Leithanien, a cultural heritage.
And
that is
their
the
outfits are
epitome
so
of this
nice.
nomadic platform with their annual musical festival celebrating its liberal mindset and harmonious prosperity is a blessing for the eyes and ears. Wiesheim, a town famous for its music education and manufacturing of instruments. Everyone loves music in this town. In its center lies the Afterglow Hall, one of the most infamous places where musicals and orchestras are performed. This place used to be the arts amplifier of Terra's most powerful caster. And
Arts
yes, he did save
amplifier?
this place. He turned this entire building
What?
into his magical wand after all. Rumors even say that he turned the entire town in his arts medium. Now, what exactly did he use the arts medium for? That's a great question. We will get back to
That's
that
a
in
lot.
bit. But before that, let's have a history lesson about Leithanien, how it became what it is now, to be more precise, the true story of the strongest caster on Terra.
Ooh.
Here is Leithanien in the year of 969. Everything is as is. The nation is ruled by different Kreise. Kreise are the equivalent of states. Each Kreis has their own way of governing their subjects, but
Makes
all
sense.
Kreise are bound by the Güldenes Gesetz. An arts contract, imagine a magical contract that makes the Kreise and their Kurfürsten physically and mentally impossible to divide into sovereign nations. Other
That's
states
beautiful.
can join the Güldenes Gesetz, and their state's name would be written on the arts contract. Small reminder, joining the Kreise is easy, but leaving is virtually impossible, simply because of the complexity of the arts contract. And this is how Leithanien acts as a single nation. The nation itself is united under a strong arts contract. Every few years, the Kurfürsten of every Kreis would come together
Sheesh,
and vote
cannot
for
read their
a ruler worthy
names.
to take up the role of the acting emperor. They shall govern the nation and make all the Kreise prosper. In actuality, it is still the Kreise and their nobles who held the real power, because they can keep the emperor's influence if they want to. In a way, the nation is officially united, but doesn't quite act like a united nation. For example, each Kreis has their own military that only acts under the order of their own Kurfürst. Of course, if the entire nation is at war, then the emperor would request the unification of the forces of all armies, but
Fair.
even then, the head of the Kreise still has control over their own army. I know it is confusing, but that's just a fraction of Leithanien's old
Let's chill in the
democracy.
back.
This is Otto Dietmar Gustav von Urtica. He was a
So
young
long.
and good lad, extremely gifted in music and arts. Dude was practically listening to the Bible in Viennese on the right ear and listening to all 600 classical Leithanian music pieces in 2
Oh, how
times the
can you?
speed on the left ear, and he mastered all these music pieces in the span of 3 months. A prodigy
What?
child, he also had the chance to get taught by the Castilian Lord of Liches. This is definitely gonna turn into a great relationship. However, Otto wasn't satisfied by all the knowledge he had gained. He looked way further into the future with an even bigger ambition than all of his peers. Every other nation was progressing relentlessly, while Leithanien was still holding on to its same old music and arts from centuries ago. And let's not forget its complicated political system that makes changes hard to begin with. The Güldenes Gesetz turned out to be a hindrance. Siracusa, one of the Kreise, has been voicing out its independence for decades, but the arts contract wouldn't let it happen, which turned into countless civil unrest inside Siracusa Kreis. What is going to happen to Leithanien in the next 20 or 30 years? Victoria has their steam knights, Iberia has made a pact with an advanced ocean civilization,
They did.
and Ursus was becoming the new military powerhouse simply with their sheer brute force. Meanwhile, Leithanien is still too stubborn to progress and can't handle its inner conflicts. Otto was already thinking 2 steps ahead, and with the unknown future of his beloved nation, he vowed to become the greatest ruler ever, once he gets his chance to sit on the throne.
Ob du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme.
Yeah! I have no idea what you're saying, but it's
so wie
great!
ich für dich eingetreten bin.
I agree!
Thus, he was chosen by the Kreise. First, he revamped the old rigid system. The
Heck
Kreise
yeah!
and their Kurfürsten gradually lost their political influence, while he centralized power for himself. Now, any normal person would look at this and criticize his abuse of power.
No, I don't know.
Especially the Kreise and their Kurfürsten, but not with Otto's regime. Not only did he say goodbye to the old system, he also brought to the common folk a prosperity they have never seen before. All thanks to his Majesty's wisdom and knowledge. Soon enough, he earned himself the title Herkunftshorn, the Horn of Genesis. But the
Dang.
most astonishing feat was him ending the political unrest of the Kreis Siracusa. Herkunftshorn single-handedly managed to override the Güldenes Gesetz and removed the name Siracusa from the contract, officially declaring the Siracusa as an independent nation, something no one
What a
believed
Chad.
to be possible. And for the next decades, he went on ruling over Leithanien. Everyone celebrated the rise of Herkunftshorn, and he
I would
go into
too.
history as the greatest ruler of Leithanien. If it were not for the atrocities he had committed in the coming decades. Remember the Kazimierz and the Kurfürsten? They actually hated him. I know, right? Shocker. They lost their army, their influence, and their tradition. So to restore the glory of the good old Leithanien custom, they tried to stir civil unrest. Basically, they disobeyed Herkunftshorn's order and were punished accordingly. The punishment for dissidents was cruel. Herkunftshorn's leadership got worse from that point onwards. To expose and punish the opposing Kurfürsten, he enacted a group of loyalists who served as his personal secret police all over Leithanien. At the same time, a dedicated group of cult-like loyalists was gradually formed around him. They were drawn to His Majesty's madness like a moth drawn by a candle. Normal
Why am I not
citizens could
surprised?
only see his cruel actions, and he was eventually coined a new title, the Witch King. While the Witch King was busy killing off his political opponents, he became a professional hikikomori, not because he became awkward around people, it was because he was too invested in his arts research. It was like an obsession, as if he was close to finding the truth behind this world. One night, he took a large dose of extra-dimensional substance to gain new knowledge. He ascended
Oh,
into a
no.
realm outside of reality and saw things that he would call the truth. The Witch King returned as a different person.
So, a
He
good
left
person
the
now?
world willing to do whatever it takes to prevent the looming end of this world by killing the creator personally. He became much more secretive about his research and a lot crueler when it comes to dealing with dissidents.
I don't think that's how you should do things.
Got worse. While treatment facilities have practically turned into his research facilities, the Witch King started doing countless arts and originium related research. To keep up with his demand, his loyal followers delivered him infected citizens to experiment on.
Oh
If you got
no.
infected during the reign of the Witch King, you have automatically become His Majesty's arts amplifier. Population of an entire town was found dead simply as a result of his art experiment. He also
horrible.
executed his political opponents by turning them into statues. the fear forever petrified to remind the common folk and his political opponent who the real boss was. The Witch King also spread his influence outside of Leithanien by following the colonialism trend of other superpowers such as Victoria. The Witch King took over control of Bolivar by establishing a puppet regime that followed his orders. Soon enough, the Gaulish Empire, the most powerful and influential nation in the Terran heartland during that period, proposed to turn Leithanien into their vassal state.
Are they crazy?
They asked the Witch King very nicely and were definitely not full of themselves.
They definitely were.
It was the worst time to send out such a bold message, but the Witch King did not turn the envoys down. He turned them into statues and sent them back to Gaul, officially declaring war. This war will go into history as the Gallo-Leithanian War.
I remember seeing this somewhere.
Of the war, Leithanien took massive L's.
It was another video.
Not only did the Gaulish army breached deeply into Leithanian soil, they also took over 4 Kreise in the span of 4 months. However, all of this was simply because the Witch King did not participate in the war personally. He did show up eventually by greeting the Gaulish army with his artificially created catastrophe, which single-handedly
Oh my gosh, I remember this. I remember it.
And now you know what the Witch King used Wiesheim's Afterglow Hall for. It was a weapon of mass destruction. It brought
Clearly.
such destructive power that Gaulish generals had to revisit their strategy, and as if that wasn't bad enough, Victoria and Ursus decided to join the war to bully Gaulish Empire while they were at the bottom and help Leithanien win the war. All
That sounds a lot worse than I expected.
Into extinction. Victoria and Ursus took the most spoil out of the war, leaving Leithanien in ruin. Since the war mostly took place on Leithanian soil, and when peace was restored, the Witch King returned to his cruel tyranny and shut himself away inside his spire. At this point, the people in Leithanien had enough of his reign. The Kurfürsten revolted against the Witch King. With the help of their carefully crafted secret weapon, whom even the Witch King had no idea about, these 2 brave wife materials breached through the defenses of the Witch King and at last managed to slay him. The fateful day will forever be marked as the liberation of Leithanien and celebrated as the September-Aufstand. The 2 who slayed their majesty have become the new official rulers and are known as the Twin Empresses. The Witch King's spire was torn apart. From its remnants, a twin tower was built, and the capital was renamed after it, Zwillingstürme. And that is how the tale of the Witch King ended, and how Leithanien stepped into the modern age.
He was doing so well, and then he had to mess it all up. Of course, how typical.
Let's have another look at the Leithanien of today. Now that we have visited its past, the Twin Empresses have re-established the influence and bureaucratic system of the Kreise and their Kurfürsten. The infected are being sent to treatment facilities and usually never seen again. Congratulations, Leithanien. After 100 years, we have come full circle. Absolutely
Wow.
Fantastic. And
They couldn't have kept the good things.
Nowadays, it is forbidden to refer to their previous ruler as the Witch King, and the name is simply a taboo. Only artworks and stage plays that depict His Majesty's downfall and demonizes him are allowed to be published, while the new ruling empresses are doing their best to restore Leithanien to its former glory. And remember when I talked about the cult-like people who gathered around the Witch King?
Yes.
The remaining loyalists of the Witch King were left with one motivation to keep them going: the revival of their beloved leader and restoration of his reign, for he is and will always be the true ruler of Leithanien. Some people will forever live in the fear of the past, while others strive to create the past glory by studying into the forbidden arts of their previous ruler, resulting in further meaningless suffering on the innocent. And that is how Leithanien, despite its advanced knowledge in arts, music and liberal education system, is still being haunted by its past shadow. Remember the Kreis Siracusa, the one that was overwritten by the Witch King and then became an independent nation? That
Yes.
is our next stop.
Ooh, yay, yay, yay.
Ah, what a beautiful afternoon, sitting outside a restaurant, drinking wine, eating pasta,
I would like to eat
appreciating
that.
the opera performance on the street, not to mention the sweet dessert waiting to be served afterwards. What could possibly go wrong in such a sophisticated nation where the infected aren't discriminated against, and the only thing sharper than your fork is...
The mafia.
Welcome to Siracusa, where the mafia doesn't just influence the government, it is the government. The streets run
Oh
red
boy.
with Mariana sauce. Oh, wait, never mind. No, it's blood. Sorry. But don't let that scare you away. Underneath the constant family disputes, extortion, and friendly reminders to pay up on time, Siracusa is a vibrant cultural hotspot. Historians, however, would argue that Syracusan culture is the result of constant influence from foreign nations. The elegant opera performance is a direct cultural heritage from Leithanien. You know, when Siracusa was still a Kreis of Leithania. Siracusa's legislation is brought by Columbia. Its tradition of delicious food and the faith in the church came straight from the holy influence of Laterano. So definitely a place worth visiting. Well,
Just not living.
as long as you can turn a blind eye on the never-ending conflicts between different mafia families on the street that result in
Oh no.
and Pheronmoods in the form of wolf. These wolf-like Pheronmoods love to play a game of battle royale. They have done it for centuries, and they grew so tired of the fighting that they decided to change the rules. Instead of fighting each other, they picked their own mortal champions to fight in their stead. Basically, they have created their own game of fate, just less complicated. All in all, the Siracusa of today is a delicious pasta with thorns.
Oh, please don't eat
They have
that.
learned the finest aspect of other nations, but what use of the legal system when the hands of the law are tied by an institution in ruins? What use does having faith in the church do if people keep dying when being killed? What reason is there to keep making pasta when the nation that praised chocolate pasta no longer exists? Okay, the last one was a joke.
What?
They should keep cooking those pastas. Well, things weren't always like this. At the beginning, Siracusa was a simple tribe. They and the Leithanien tribes had troubles dealing with their friendly neighbors. So to be able to defend themselves from their neighbors, they proposed to join forces with Leithanian tribes. Through a long negotiation process, Leithanian tribes decided to make the Siracusan tribe a part of their Reich, and thus Siracusa has become a part of Leithanien, not just officially, but also bound by the Güldenes Gesetzarts. What Siracusa didn't expect was the social hierarchy they experienced through the next century. They were treated like the backwater cousins, good enough to fight on the front line, but not good enough to get a seat at the cool kids table. They were seen as sword-swinging barbarians. Even after picking up Leithanian instruments and fine-tuning their artistic taste, they never quite shocked that whole primitive stereotype.
Oh, that's
Basically
horrible.
second-class citizens. Dissatisfaction grew stronger over the years, and eventually, the people of the Siracusa Kreis started protesting. They wanted to become independent. This, of course, was not taken lightly by the other Kreise, and they sent their forces to quench the unrest, which actually made it worse.
Well, yeah,
Eventually,
obviously.
protests spread around the entire Kreis of Siracusa and evolved into a civil war. It was said that Siracusa Kreis has passed the point of no return. If it were
That's
not
a good
for the
one.
Witch King to step in, rewriting the Güldenes Gesetz and officially declaring the independence of Siracusa. And then, Siracusa was free from the shackles of their previous masters. Finally, they could govern for themselves. They have learned the best aspect of Leithanien, the appreciation for music and art. So, in the following decades, Siracusa prospered under their new jurisdiction. Nah, just kidding. In the
Aw,
capital,
man.
someone decided to practice a little terrorism by blowing up the entire building, killing every governing head.
They did
present,
what?
leaving Siracusa as a nation without its government. And you know when that happened? Literally 2 days after the declaration of their independence. And
What
then,
the?
total anarchy. Siracusa was split into multiple mafia families who treated the nation like a giant monopoly board, only instead of buying real estate
That is so
they blew those
ridiculous.
up and annexed entire cities. I mean, why bother building a government when you can just let the 12 most powerful mafia families run the show? This whole bombing and killing each other lasted, wait for it, it lasted
Ow.
70 years.
I stubbed my
70
toe.
years of constant backstabbing, gang wars,
Oh
and
my
all sorts
gosh.
of violent activities that resulted in the suffering of the common folk.
I feel sorry for the common people.
Joined one of the mafia gangs to gain protection and to somewhat live a normal life. Well, for Syracusans, normal was something else. Back in the days, as long as you didn't get shot on the street, anything could be considered normal. That is until Signora Cecilia stepped in.
Signora Cecilia was like, alright, this whole burn everything to the ground thing is getting a bit old. How about we, stop killing each other for a change? Having finished her studies abroad in Laterano, because when the Mafia is running your country, naturally you go study at Terra's Vatican for the holy experience. Cecilia came back and decided to play peacemaker. How?
They're not gonna try to kill her, right? Okay, good.
A system called Pistole e Ordine, Guns and Order. Sounds cozy, right? Cecilia didn't just convince the Mafia to stop shooting each other every 5 minutes. She established a functional, semi-functional government. She even used the power of religion to help unite them. Like, if Jesus says we should stop murdering each other, then who are we to argue? Of course, if you didn't listen, she could still make you disappear in about 5 seconds. After 70 years of constant anarchy, Siracusa finally started to have some resemblance of peace. Sure, it's a fragile, held together by bribes, shady deals, and occasional assassinations. But hey, we're just here for the past abilities, and for the next 60 years, things have been stable, especially now that you have got the Confederate Council and Supreme Court, although both are basically just puppets for Cecilia's mafia-backed regime. So technically even a gavel strike can end alive, but hey, at least they pretend to care about civilian safety now. Of course,
yay!
Inside Siracusa is satisfied with this peaceful system. New generations who think maybe the mafia shouldn't run everything, or maybe we should build a society where people don't get shot on broad daylight.
That would be very reasonable.
Right? The Cecilia family eventually expanded its own business all across Terra, primarily in Colombia, because
Colombia?
Was making
because of the smuggling,
cash.
okay.
Well, until the Colombian government took the matter a bit more seriously. The most prominent mafia clan, the Texas family, got wiped out due to being too unruly there, and that is when most of the Syracusan families returned back to their homeland, and that is pretty much where we are now. So would I recommend a visit to Siracusa? Absolutely, because the food is simply to die for. Our next stop is a pretty cold place, and it will take a bit until we arrive there. So in the meantime, why don't we have a little history lesson about a nation from the past, introducing the Gaulish Empire. If
the Gaulish Empire.
Search engine, you might have seen obscure results, such as why are Gaulish people so gay, so cringe, or so full of themselves, or bad at Victorian tongue. Don't be fooled by these misinformations. Haters don't want you to know, but Gaul used to be the superpower on Terra. Back in the days, it was the nation of the Liberis, bird people. Gaul was known for their cultural influence and overwhelming military strength. Gaul was also the only nation in the
just had to make a stupid mistake, didn't they?
Able to withstand the Nightmoran invasions, and they kept expanding their borders by annexing neighboring city-states. They were the undisputed ruling nation, which was also why all the other neighbors even adopted their tongue. Basically, everyone spoke French. I know, right? Hellish time for those neighbors, worse than catastrophe and suffering from oropathy. Gaul's most important feat was achieved at the height of the Gallic era. Yes, the era was literally named after their nation. They put Lingones, their capital city, on a ginormous mobile plate, which was powered by Originium, and thus the first nomadic city was born. It was the beginning.
So they're the ones that pioneered
the Terran civilization. Other nations were elated by this revelation, and thus Lingones was coined capital of Terra. This sparked the renaissance of Gaulish art, economic growth, and last but not least, their territorial expansion. However, Gaul's aggressive expansionism ultimately led to.
So don't be greedy! That's the lesson we're learning here.
Oh, sorry, I read it wrong. His name is Corsica the First, not Croissant. Anyway, he realized that after all these years of steady growth and expansionism, the nation has reached an all-time high. This all sounds pretty good for everyone. However, he and the head of the state were able to foresee a slow but inevitable decline of Gaulish influence. Due to the growing resentment and steady development of other superpowers, Ursus is aggressively expanding its territory and was about to start its 10th campaign on
10th campaign, don't they ever learn?
By claiming unfathomable amount of land, other nations felt the FOMO and followed suit.
Don't feel FOMO!
Colonialism. One of
Victoria's most
successful colony being Colombia, simply because of its rich originium sources and rare occurrence of catastrophes,
and Iberia was experiencing its golden age with their advanced fleet and new technology from the ocean. And this was the position Gaul was in the middle of, so they cooked a strategy. First, they made sure their biggest rival would think twice before invading Gaul by supporting the independence of Columbia, which made Victoria very furious, and they tried everything in their power to prevent the independence.
Yeah, that's
Ultimately,
not gonna happen.
Victoria failed to prevent the independence
Yep.
of Columbia. Iberia does
Yay,
not pose any real threats to
Columbia!
Gaul, since they are more into exploring the ocean and bullying Victoria at naval warfare. Like they say, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. Ursus at that time had their hands full dealing with Kazimierz, so Gaul planned out their next step.
You know, it's starting to sound like all the nations have like a problem with reining in their greed. Basically, in every single historical, or I guess history for each nation so far, it's like, oh yeah, we had the right idea, but we decided to basically mess it all up because we wanted to, you know, expand and have more power. Like, if they didn't do that, then wouldn't it be fine? But no, they decided they wanted to be selfish and greedy and just mess everything up because why not, right?
To keep their grip on the power, they needed to unify their people, and to do so, they needed a common enemy, a nation no one would help if being invaded. They took Leithanien
they
on
messed
their
up
side
though.
and sent out envoys to give outrageous requests, which resulted in the envoys turning into statues. Now that we have discussed this historical part from the point of view of Gaul, I can say that it was all intended. They knew their proposal was bound to cause Leithanien to react aggressively, especially under the Witch King's rule. So that is when the Gallo-Leithanian War broke out. Gaul was absolutely sure that no other nation would
Never be
Leithanien
100% sure.
until the Witch King participated
Oh
in the war
boy.
personally and showed Gaul what a real aura looked like. That is when the other two superpowers noticed the decline of Gaul. They acted accordingly and officially declared war on them. Both Victoria and Ursus joined forces to assist Leithanien. What can I say? What was supposed to be a one-sided, swift war turned into a world war that is known as the War of the Four Nations. Gaul lost the war in the end and paid the heaviest price by being disintegrated. Majority of the war spoils were being taken by the Ursus Empire. Victoria, on the other hand, took the vast land of Gaul as well as its capital, and from that day onward, Lingones was renamed to Londinium. And this
Londinia.
made Victoria the new leading nation on Terra, and Gaul will forever be seen as a superpower from the past. Their subject now spread across Terra, still trying to restore their once great
They
nation.
are.
And we have
Sounds like a
arrived at our
pain.
destination. Welcome to Kjerag. It
Oh,
is
I was
a
looking
nation
forward to
that
this
was
one.
built
This
by
one was the
Pharaohs
most.
in the past, which is why the
I don't know why, but this one, because I did watch a lot of trailers, as a lot of you might know, and have watched my Arknights content. But I feel like this is the one country that I was most curious about. This one, and I believe Iberia with the whole sea monster stuff. And it feels like there's so much mystery that I can uncover there. So I'm really looking forward to what he's gonna say about it.
inhabitants of this place are pretty religious. After all, what better way to show your faith than naming your own country after the Pharaoh itself? Kjerag, a place encircled
So
by
that's
snowy
what it
mountains,
is.
mostly known for being an introverted nation that uphold their traditional customs even in this modern age. I do have great news. Recently Kjerag has opened up. What was just a boring
Ooh.
collection of tribes is becoming a new tourist destination.
I mean,
Even
that's a
though
good thing,
Kjerag
sort
has
of.
opened up for tourism, visiting them still feels like we are the tourist attraction and not the other way around. I guess we still need to break the ice. Also, this is probably the only
That's a good
snowy
one.
place that is suitable for a vacation. You ask me why?
Suitable.
Maybe because the other snowy place grows rootless flowers, has weird pitch black snow.
That
and
doesn't
inside
look
KGB
good.
units try
Oh
to
boy.
kill you. In Kjerag, the only thing you need to be wary of is the cold environment that might pose some danger.
Don't get yourself frozen. It would lead to slipping and falling into a hole. Trust me, this kind of thing occurs on a regular basis, even to locals. Anyway,
That sounds
overall,
horrible.
Kjerag is a very peaceful nation. You can tell that by looking through its history. Literally nothing happens for centuries on end, and they never bothered developing either. Why would they, when this place is so peaceful and no other nation has any interest because it is so cold and isolated? This place really started to embrace.
In some ways, that sounds pretty nice. Like, sure, growing and developing is great, and if they allow their people to immigrate to other places, if they really want that kind of taste of development. But I do find that there are some pros to being able to preserve your tradition and history without needing to change too much over the years, because it's not like it's that much of a necessity if they're that comfortable with their life right now. At the very least, that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. And it's just, it sounds peaceful in some ways. Obviously, there's always going to be something though. So I guess we'll see here.
The outside world after a shift of power. You see, Kjerag is ruled by 3 clans: the Browntails, the Palaroaches, and the Silver Ashes. Both
Silver
Browntails
Ashes!
and Palaroaches are conservatives, while the Silver Ashes are the only clan that has contact with the outside world. Fast forward a few centuries, you'd think Kjerag would have enjoyed some peaceful isolations, right?
I
Well,
wish.
not
I
quite.
hope.
See,
Aw,
while
darn.
the rest of the world was out there inventing things like industry, Olafur Silver Ash, the patriarch of the Silver Ashes, decided it was high time Kjerag jumped on the modernization bandwagon. Why stay in
No!
the mountains making religious artifacts when you can build factories and railways? Especially the railways, they really needed to build a strong economy.
Okay,
Luckily,
railways, I can
he had
see
some
why.
Connections to the Victorian Empire, which gave him the idea to model the whole country on Victorian business management. A classic foreign influence for better profits move, but the Browntails and the Palaroaches hated the idea. I mean, Olafur wanted railways to be built. Railways on this sacred land, on the holy land of Kjerag. They plotted an assassination on Olafur, and through a complicated political game, Olafur died in a train accident. How ironic, he always wanted more.
That is really
The two
ironic.
conservative factions pushed the blame to a family that was allied with the Silver Ashes and claimed that they betrayed them, and also ostracized the Silver Ash family from the Tri-Clan governing system. They said the death of their head was a punishment from Kjerag. If I were born in Kjerag, I'd actually believed in that shit. The whole incident
Yeah.
made Kjerag more isolated than before. That was until one man returned after studying abroad. Because that's what future leaders always do. They leave their nation in chaos behind to find enlightenment from the outside world and bring their teachings back for salvation. And Sioda Silver Ash returned from his internship in Victoria. He pushed modernization and foreign trade. He even had the balls to mine near Mount Carlin. It is considered one of the most sacred places in Kjerag.
Why would you go that
the Conservatives
far?
were not thrilled. Tensions boiled over when the great elder of the Winebear court was poisoned, and both sides prepared for civil war. But before blood could be
Oh
spilled,
no.
Anya, the Saintess, descended from Mount Carlin and created a miracle which halted the fighting. In the end, the clans unified under her rule, with the Silver Ashes securing their victory, while Kjerag publicly spun the whole affair as a peaceful resolution. I know all of this sounds very coincidental and unexplained, not to mention the perfect timing of Anya turning the tide and preventing a full-scale civil war. Well, it was all thanks to their Farenmood goddess Kjerag, who actually never left Kjerag. Ever since she disappeared, she has been on incognito mode, observing by working as a part-time housemaid in the High Priest's palace. And with new people coming into power, there will be new agendas, and one of those agendas is to build a weapon factory, establishing trade with foreign nations, so that Kjerag can finally participate in the global economy. They started importing tons of metals and other resources from their friendly neighbor, Victoria.
Friendly neighbor,
Throughout this
huh?
journey, I have mentioned the nation Victoria a handful of times already.
I gotta say, and I keep stubbing my toe. I should really move that. Okay, I moved it. But it feels like I'm seeing a pattern here. And I'm pretty sure it's also the same in real life too. But it's either it was peaceful to begin with, or they're already a superpower and then got greedy and then ended up making mistakes because they were too greedy. In this case, it was already peaceful to some degree, and then they had to make it worse by wanting railways and all of that stuff, and then it just makes me bitter, sweet about it all. But at the same time, I guess we'll see Victoria next now.
And now it is time to finally have a proper introduction, mostly populated by felines with a strong
Yes,
accent,
felines!
check. Known for their
Bloody hell!
colonialism that influenced countless other nations, check. Was once
Yes.
a world-dominating superpower on Terra, check. Is now on decline
yes.
because of its complex political altercations, which is killing the nation from the inside, check. My dear
Yep.
visitor, welcome to the Victorian Empire, the carbon
Thank
copy
you.
of today's United Kingdom, but with
Yeah.
more competitive racism against the infected, game-changing colonialism, offensive place names, last but not least, a big gap between the common folk and the nobles. Victoria stands as one of the nations with the most profoundly impactful history, a legacy so vast and far-reaching that
You know, hearing this, I think Yan might be the best nation for a normal person. Unless you're infected, of course, but it just seems like a nice place to live in general. Would you choose any of the nations in here? Or would you just rather not even be alive in there? Like, if you were sent to this world, then which nation would you choose to live in? And why?
one would be hardly pressed to find any other nation with such cultural influence, military might, or dare I say, sheer bloody-mindedness. So, let's commence forth on this marvelous journey through its splendid historical importance. Pardon for my Victorian tongue. Before Victoria became an empire, there was this fertile region, devoid from dangerous beasts and catastrophes. One day, a tribe of ancient
Ooh,
Dracos discovered this place and
Dracos.
saw the potential of it. They decided to call this place their new home. Over the next few decades, other nomadic tribes and settlers joined their party. Now, let's be clear, this wasn't a real nation at that time yet. It was more like a big campsite village run by the Dracos, who were still doing nomadic things. This kind of semi-nomadic lifestyle didn't last long until it became old-fashioned, so the people wanted a change, which resulted in a dispute of different lifestyles. There were two Draco houses representing the two opposing lifestyles.
Monarchy?
One of them wanted to follow the trend of
No!
a clear social hierarchy and imperial rules. Back in that era, it was a trend for nations to be established like that, because Sargon, the superpower at that time, was structured with a monarchy ruling over its common folk. You know, the old time when slavery and peasants working for the nobles was trendy. On the other hand, the opposing Draco house wanted to keep their nomadic lifestyle.
I guess they
this
split?
could have gone the usual route of bash each other with rocks until one's leader dies a brutal death. But no, surprisingly, the Dracos decided to
Wow!
split in peace.
Isn't this like the first time that we actually get to see a nation actually split into two peacefully? Or am I just saying it too soon? Maybe.
The monarchists took a nice fertile valley and said, hey, we are a kingdom now, let's call it Victoria, while the conservatives kept their nomadic lifestyle and wandered through the land until they found a region fit to settle, which will be named Terra by the future generations. Both houses lived peacefully for a few decades until they entered the Common Era. Remember the Kagan and his boys? That's right. They also decided to invade the two Victorian kingdoms to fulfill their coming of age practice. And like any other overambitious big brother, Victoria decided that protecting Terra was in both houses' best interest, but it really meant annexing Terra. The official record, written in flowery Victorian handwriting, claimed it was all like a tea party. But actually, Terra was taken over by force.
How could you do that?
This did not suit the Draco House of Terra. So take a guess what Victoria's solution was.
Take it over anyways.
Family to bend their knees, but keep their fancy titles, because you know.
What a betrayal.
Hard. The king of Terra got renamed and was told to be happy with his nobility. I'm sure that went over really well. But hey,
Yeah.
now Victoria is reunited after all this bloodshed and sacrifice, so it was all worth it. there is no way it would turn into a future conflict.
It definitely will.
And for the next few centuries, the Victoria Empire was ruled by the Draco houses peacefully. However, all of this changed when the House of Cards in Sargon fell, which triggered a massive purge on their ruling race, the Aslan. Not a single family member was spared, even distant relatives were targeted. One noble family of the Aslan house managed to flee from Sargon and requested the Victorian royal house for shelter. And as we have established, the monarchy system of Victoria was a carbon copy from Sargon, so in a way, the Draco House were admirers of the Sargon Empire. With open arms, they welcomed the Aslan family into their royal
Well, that's
house
nice.
as permanent guests. I mean, what could they do to harm the Victorian Empire, right?
Well,
They're
probably
just
a lot.
bunch of glorified felines who lost their entire livelihood and most of their family members at home. They are just the nice guests at the dinner table. They wouldn't take over the throne.
They
right?
definitely will.
Over the next few years, the Aslans became extremely popular among the Victorian common folk because the Aslans were a family of chads. They treated people with respect and helped the poor. In other words, foreign deeds for the Draco House, and with the people on the Aslan's side, they started a palace coup against the Victorian Dracos, which succeeded without much resistance. The Terra House, on the other hand, decided to resist, but ultimately signed a double monarchy rule agreement with the Aslan House, and from that day onward, both the Draco House and the Aslan House ruled Victoria together peacefully. That is, if we can count out all the political power games and conspiracies constantly happening in the background. In any way, the Aslans brought an age of peace and prosperity, and everything developed during that period. The Victorians were the first to establish the wide usage of originium crystal, starting the Industrial Revolution of the crystallization age. They quadrupled their factory production, created an abundance of jobs, school-educated the masses, and they built railways for faster transportation throughout the nation. They were finally able to travel through all the places with ridiculous
names.
Dick Place,
What?
Cockmouth, Penis Stone,
What?
Shitterton, County
There's actually something called...
Londinium. It was like Victoria was just
Oh, wow.
figuring out how to turn their people into more efficient cogs in a massive economic machine. That good old 19th century industrial charm where everyone's a child laborer and your
Wow.
lives are slowly turning into suit. But on
Amazing.
Terra, people just got infected and got oropathy, which was definitely not the best way to live in Victoria. But hey,
Clearly.
they had prosperity. This era was called the Victorian era. Thanks to all the industrialization, Victoria has slowly become one of the superpower that even nations like Gaul had to consider a serious rival. Classic French versus England lore. And that is when Victoria invented something out of the ordinary. They called it colonialism. It is when you claim a foreign land yours and start exploiting its
Colonialism.
resources, often in the name of Victoria or the betterment of uncivilized people, even if the locals didn't ask for it. I mean, what are they gonna do about it, right? Victoria got big cannons, endless supply of oil and tea, and I haven't even mentioned the Steam Knights. Imagine an originium-powered cattle that can shoot out missiles and has one of the strongest physical attacks known to man, condensed into a thick power armor. Now imagine it being piloted by the most patriotic soldier. That is what one Steam Knight is made of. They are tasked to take orders directly from the parliament's aristocrats to protect the king and the country. These heavily armored fellows look pretty big, but do not confuse mass with imprecision and sluggishness. Steam Knights have extremely high reactions and accuracy in hitting their targets. Combined with their thick and heavy armor, they are pretty much unstoppable once they have locked in. But it doesn't stop there. These
Oh my
Steam Knights
gosh.
can also leap into the air and perform a
What?
freaking Gundam attack. Throughout history, the Steam Knights have been proven to be Victoria's strongest military assets. Their war efforts have been engraved into legends and folktales. Fast forward a few decades, colonies of Victoria could be found everywhere. If a plot of land can hold a boot, then it should belong to Victoria, was a famous Victorian saying from that period of time. And as you might have guessed, the colonists weren't seen as equals to Victoria.
Of course they
The constant mistreatment
aren't.
over the years made the biggest colony, Columbia, revolt against its own master. Victoria took the matters extremely seriously and sent their fleet to stop the civil unrest. Funny enough, The independence movement was in the interest of Gaul, so they sent Columbia direct military aid and turned the simple civil unrest into an actual full-scale war. Thanks to Columbia's smart strategy and Gaul's direct support, Columbia was able to win the war and declare its independence. Victoria had to accept it because of its own affairs it had to deal with at home. Imagine losing to your own colony only because of foreign interference. The Victorian royal house was furious about this matter.
Clearly, look at them fighting right now.
The Declaration of Independence, Billiton also jumped out of the line and declared their independence, which Victoria also failed to suppress. And to make matters worse, Victoria just lost a major naval war against Iberia, losing a large portion of their warships. However, despite all of this, it did not deter Victoria from wanting to become the world-dominating empire.
What is up with their obsession of dominating the world?
Despite all the previous loss, the Victorian Empire kept inserting their geopolitical might to gain influence. They basically bullied smaller nations, mostly in the name of peace and security, like leading the Grand Crusade against Castile simply by declaring them as the biggest threat of all Terran inhabitants. Let's be xenophobic. It's really in this year.
What is that?
Those infected hard to fear.
Oh, I'm tearing up.
Since the Steam Knights came to call, let's learn to love our empire by purging one and all. We know we ought to hate them. They're different, you see. We've read of all the sins in history and decree. The folks that fought in Castile told us how it used to be. The gospel truth was forged in wars that we declare as free. Let's wipe out their last stronghold. They're better off oppressed. We'll serve them up a genocide they never will forget. The first catastrophe proved that they're a dangerous lot. So it is our duty to take them down, destroy the plot. You see,
it's beautiful.
Will never be as good as felines here. We're
What a masterpiece.
Industrious, the best on Terra sphere. So step aside, sarcasm. We are ready for your worst. We know you try to raid us, enslave us, or degrade us, or slaughter us and invade us unless we
what?
first. For the following
masterpiece.
only picked small bones because of the previous major losses they tanked. It was only during the Gaul-Leithanien war that they noticed the decline of Gaul. So, to take political revenge on Gaul, they allied themselves with Ursus and Leithanien. As we know, the war resulted in an absolute victory and the end of Gaul. You helped my colony rebel? I'm gonna fuck your whole country from behind. Victoria took over the majority of
So bitter.
land and officially claimed to be the new dominant nation, leading to a new era of peace and prosperity for the next few decades. But this era of prosperity didn't last long. A slow decline was happening in the background. While the royal house burned cash like coal, the wars were dragging on. Spoils were not split evenly. The rich were getting richer, and the
Of
poor
course
were
it's
getting
like that.
poorer. The situation came to a peak when their king tried to raise
Are
the
you
tax for the
oh.
aristocrats. The aristocrats responded by losing their collective minds. They didn't just refuse, they decided to whip up a popular uprising. That's
Oh,
right, the
no.
rich folks got the peasants to overthrow the king. He was promptly
Are you
executed and
serious?
publicly hanged in his own royal
But
garden.
he
So
was
as a
trying
result,
to be
the
more...
aristocrats somehow did an Uno reverse card on their majesty and made the people of Victoria think he was the reason why their nation was on the decline. And with the king gone, the 8 dukes, Victoria's regional governors, gathered inside Londinium, you know, to fill the power vacuum. In other words, to take over Victoria for themselves. And if you think this was already dirty enough, get ready for what they did next.
What did they do
dukes
next?
passed some new laws, making sure that no other noble could waltz into Londinium without special
What?
permission. It was a power move, plain and simple. They wanted
kind
to
of
make sure
stupid.
that no one else could challenge their grip on the empire. But hold your
Okay.
teeth, this wasn't the worst thing. As we all
Oh,
know,
it's
bad
not.
leaders create bad times, and bad
Yes.
times create dangerous political agendas. Remember the Tarrants? The ones
Yes.
forcefully assimilated into Victoria Kingdom centuries ago and then were never treated equally? Yeah, they remember too. These Terra nationalists or pro-Draco monarchists if you prefer, are still clinging to that dream of independence like it is their last shred of dignity, and they have been preparing for revolt for a very, very long time. The moment anyone from Victoria tries to tell them otherwise, it is pretty much Victorian detected, opinion rejected. Expect them to throw a ton of stones at Victorian soldiers too. They absolutely hate being suppressed by Victoria, and that's just about enough of being treated like second-class citizens. Actually, that is still not the worst thing. Yep,
It's not.
worse. One of the dukes
Are you
tried to
kidding
take
me?
over the parliament in Londinium. This act made the other dukes anxious, so they came up with a brilliant solution. Instead of working together to prevent the success of the coup, they hired external mercenaries. Let me tell you, the gun they hired were not small. It was big guns, the Castilian Military Commission to be exact. These Castel mercs were hired to restore order in Londinium. You heard that right. They hired Castel mercenaries, the same Castel whose homeland Victoria torn apart in the past. This is like hiring the guy you just beat to the ground to help you clean up your own house. Surely nothing could go wrong, right? I mean, hey, the Castel Military Commission did wipe out the rebels. They just went a step further by stabbing the dukes who hired them in the back and taking over Londinium for themselves. They then threw quite a big party because they brought a lot of Sarkas tribes along the way, and while they had the Victorian factories and technologies with them, they built one of the most terrifying weapons Terra has ever seen. The Shard. Not to be confused with
Shard?
the real Shard in London. This
Oh, there's
was
actually
a
something
shard
called the Shard?
capable of creating artificial catastrophes from a safe distance. And with that, we are back in the present. The Victoria of today, a nation with rich history, but is now only a shadow of its former glory. They have lost pretty much everything. The belief of their citizens have been trampled for years by the dukes and merchants. Now that the king is gone, the nobles are no longer unified under one ideology. Of course, it was never really unified in the first place, but ever since the Londinium crisis, this problem has been out of control. Their feared military has become a myth and legend because they themselves abandoned their most powerful allies, so no one came to save during such a crisis. Now, it is a nation that can't run its own capital city and doesn't even have a leader. Now, I know what you are dying to ask. Is Victoria still worth visiting? Well,
Yes.
let's consider the facts.
Maybe, at least
If
we're
you
not being
want to
shot,
stroll down
right?
the street in Londinium, let me warn you, these streets might not be safe. You might end up meeting a Terran loyalist. To avoid being questioned about your political stance, you have to be dressed like a Terran. Then again, the likelihood to meet a Victorian patriot
There's
is
no
also pretty
winning.
high. In that case, expect a nice beating from them. But wait, what if you dressed like you support Victoria? Then you will get knifed by Terra nationalists.
Oh,
from every
boy.
direction. You might just stay inside, but then you will get kidnapped by the Sarkas, and they will send you to their forced labor camp. Not because they are racist or anything. Oh wait, never mind, they are kinda racist. Let's not just talk about the people. Let's also take a glance at the architecture of the city. Don't forget that Londinium is Terra's oldest nomadic city. In other words, the
I like how Plus keeps saying, oh, they're not racist, but they actually are. It makes it more entertaining to watch.
city is of huge historical significance with a lot of old buildings. Some of those buildings and pillars are a little bit too brittle, so don't try to push those. You might accidentally kill some innocent
Ah!
felons. And how could I forget the constant artillery bombardments? Those
Are you-
gigantic
oh my
cannons
gosh.
on Londinium's thick and impenetrable walls
That's
are
ridiculous.
perfectly positioned, facing inwards. Yeah, that's because the Castilian mercs took over those, and they have been firing bombshells after bombshells to get rid of the internal conflicts. They don't
So basically, they're using violence in order to stop conflicts, but it's just gonna bring about more violence.
even care if their own people fall victim to these attacks. And if you were hoping
Oh,
for some
no.
peace and quiet outside of the capital, I got some bad news for you.
Oh,
the wheat
no,
fields
what
out
is
there look
it?
pretty, right? You better tell that to the Terra nationalists. So, all facts considered, you should probably not visit Victoria at this current stage. We sadly
Yeah.
missed its peak when it was still cool to take a visit and study there. With that being said, we have traveled through half of Terra, and I gotta say, this has been quite a journey so far. Exploring the history of so many nations, from the militaristic might of Ursus to the isolated but peaceful Kjerag, from the corporate-driven technocratic Kazimierz to the classical music enthusiastic Leithanien, and the once mighty but now fractured Victoria, each place we visited offers a unique blend of triumphs and tragedies, reflecting the ups and downs of their history. However, as we have traveled through all these places, I think it was evident that the shadows often overshadow the light. Kazimierz' radiant glow of modernism.
When you think about it, our lives are also like that, where the shadows overshadow the light, which is why a lot of people always recommend that you at least try your best to look at the good, because there's so much negativity, so much shadows, so to speak, in our own lives. And I think that's also another reason why Arknights is so popular, is because they don't hide the shadow. You very much see the good and the ugly very clearly. And from there, you are allowed to form your own opinions. But another thing is that we see and hear the opinions and understand the viewpoints of every faction. Doesn't mean that we actually agree with them, but the fact that we're able to actually go deep into their own thoughts, their own motivations, and the reason why they're like this is another very important thing that I like about Arknights. Because a lot of the time, it's usually very black and white, or even if you kind of understand, it's like, no, not really. But in this game, the lore is very much strong because of the fact that us, the readers, the players, are allowed to formulate our own opinions about each faction, about each nation, and determine whether we actually like that nation or faction, so to speak, or if we actually agree with them partially or fully or not. And that's always something that I quite appreciate compared to being spoon-fed. Not that I hate being spoon-fed, sometimes I just want the information right then and there, but depending on the world setting and the story, it's very much nice to piece things together. A bit like Lord of Mysteries and One Piece in here with Arknights.
Blinding us from looking through its dark facade, just like Lungmen's cultural vibrancy being displayed in front of its city underbelly. The bad often lurks just beneath the surface.
Yep.
The exploitation of the infected in Billiton reveals a grim reality of commodification and expendability of the workforce.
I thought they would take care of them better.
Its brutal military expansion highlights a history steeped in expansionism and power. The lavish lifestyle of nobles has always been a stark contrast with the peasants all across Terra, and in all of these exploitations, it is always the same groups of people who get victimized, the infected and the common folk. Now,
yes, that is very true.
Gloom, so why would anyone even want to get into the lore? Well, I think I'm not speaking only for myself when I say I'm kind of
yeah, you're right.
Wait, okay, anyway. Amidst this bleak world lies a certain fascination. I think the lore of Arknights is, in a way, resonating with us.
Yes, because it is very much like
further into its narrative
our
of
world.
Suffering, tragedy, and redemption, whether through the epic tales of entire nations or the intimate struggle of individual character. The emotional depth of this world captivates us. Maybe it is this complexity that kept us delving deeper. Or maybe it is because of its blend of despair and resistance that reflects our own experience. I think it goes without saying that a lot of Terra's history has similarities with our world.
I do love when it reflects our actual world, because it does make it easier to pick up ideas, history bits, and things like that. But I also love the fact that the lore in this game is also very distinct. And it's not like so distinct to the point that it's difficult to, consume or even absorb in your mind. It's distinct in a way where it's very vivid in your brain, but to a degree where it doesn't seem unfathomable or a totally different world. It is with the magic system and the oropathy and all that. But we kind of have similar ideas in our world too, which is the nice part about trying to learn the lore of Arknights. Because it's so easy to, I guess, consume the lore and understand it.
Man, when lore writers start copying from each other, the infected, just like any other minority
in
our society, endure systematic injustice. Their difficulties often overlooked in favor of those in power and rich. The history of Terra is littered with examples of nobility evading crimes, where the infected and poor suffered under it. And this really makes one think, It really confronts one with the uncomfortable truth about our reality.
I think another thing is that I think this game can also help you with reflecting with yourself. And one thing that most people are very uncomfortable with is themselves, what their, struggles are, their happiness, the uncomfortable truths about themselves and the place around them and the people around them. Those are all things that people like to ignore because they want to focus on the now. But this game, the story really does try to make you uncomfortable, not in like a bad way, but rather more in the way where you start to understand things about yourself and start to reflect it. That aspect, that reflection, that uncomfortable moment is what Arknights really does a good job at bringing about. Not to mention, it helps you get used to, or at least be more comfortable with that discomfort. Basically, it's as if when you turn off all of your devices and you're basically in the woods alone, you're living on your own. How comfortable are you with yourself? And then if you place yourself in society, any part of society, how comfortable are you with yourself, with how you interact with that part of society? And that's also like, there's like a lot of things I really like about the Arknights lore and how they present it. But I think those uncomfortable moments and reflection and connection with our world is the most powerful part about the story in Arknights.
The struggles of the weak are often ignored in the face of the powerful. Well, we reap what we sow. A reminder that the consequences of our actions shape the world around us. Despite the widespread suffering, we challenge ourselves to resist our own satisfaction and gain. Does our hope have to be sown upon somebody's sorrow? We have a choice: to confront the monsters we have created,
Yes.
or to become passive observers in a world that feels like hell on earth. And with that being said, I truly wish people can come together to achieve bigger things, because the only people benefiting from conflict are those who sit at the top. If
That's
the people
very
on Terra
true.
cannot unite as one, then there is no hope in resolving the inevitable apocalypse, which will be the second half of our journey. We will be taking a stroll into the deep, looking at a threat that might flood the entirety of
I'm
Terra.
really interested in this
A
one.
threat from the north, that even the knowledge of it can pose danger. Of course, we will also visit the most advanced nation on Terra, and at last, we will gaze upon the stars. This has been the first part of Arknights All Nations Explored, and I will see you in the next one.
I really enjoyed this video. There was something, and I did give it a like. It was a really good video, and I very much enjoyed the editing. The way that he presented the nations was very clear-cut, but not to a degree where it's too overwhelming, which is, again, something I really appreciate. And I was hoping that he would cover like the stuff that I did mention, I think in the middle of the video, but it seems like that's going to be in part 2. So I do hope that maybe I can check that out eventually. But he basically hit on all the points that I wanted to say about the connection with our world and Arknights. Yes, it's a game, it's a story, obviously. It's not actually real, it's fiction. But even inside fiction, there are always going to be some level of truths and lessons. And I think what he said at the end of the video is what Arknights wants to teach us. And of course, there are some stories where you don't really learn anything, it's just for fun, pure entertainment. Those are always great too. But I always think it's better if, even if you do enjoy a story, you should learn from it. It's just like reading a novel when you are, I don't really know if you have English classes, but if you have like similar classes where you read stuff and then you have to write book reports and whatnot, it's kind of like that, where you have to learn the messages that the author or creator wants you to know. And if you learn from it, internalize it, reflect on it, and act on it, then that's always the ideal situation. Obviously, not everyone, has the maturity or, I guess, patience or even the time to really be able to think about such things process it and then act on it. But even so, even if it takes a very long time, like until you're like 80 or something to act on something, that's fine as long as you act on it eventually and you're more comfortable with yourself and more comfortable with the reality around you and you feel like you know what to do next. And I think that consuming stories like these is always going to be beneficial for our growth as a person. And I don't really remember where I was going with this, but overall, I really enjoyed the video and the editing was impeccable. And I just really adored every bit of this. This might be one of my favorites so far that I've seen. I'm looking forward to checking out more Arknights lore videos. So if you do have any recommendations, please let me know down below. I'm okay if it has like spoilers, as long as it's not like main story spoilers, I'm okay with that. Mostly because when I'm actually playing the game, sometimes I have a hard time remembering concepts and nations. So being able to watch something like this and then get that knowledge reinforced when I'm actually experiencing the story helps a lot. At least personally for me. I don't really know about you guys, but I have a really bad memory, so I really need to be able to reinforce it multiple times in order for it to truly establish inside of my head. So it's helpful that I'm able to connect the dots slowly by watching things like this. And when I was watching this, I was quite surprised that I was able to connect a lot of the things that you guys told me, but also what I experienced in the game so far and in the trailers that I've seen and sort of remember. I don't remember everything, but I at least am starting to remember things a lot more, I guess, better, because I hear these repeated concepts, repeated histories, and names of nations, when previously it would have been a bit overwhelming to remember because it's like so many nations and countries. I guess nations is more accurate to remember compared to like if I was introduced this like this by other people who are really good at presenting information and making it much clearer, and then experiencing it in the story, the appreciation goes a lot more further, and I'm able to understand and notice certain aspects that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise. Like, why are they like this? Oh, I remember. That kind of thing. So it really helps. So if you have any suggestions on, Arknights lore videos, or even just Arknights review videos, it doesn't even need to be Arknights actually, it could be other games in general as well. Whatever you would like me to react to, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to go to the original video, which is linked in the description and in the pinned comment, and give it a like and all of that, so you know the drill. And of course, if you enjoyed my reaction to this video, then make sure to give it a like, comment down below, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.